And good morning, everyone, and welcome to a webinar update on beverage container recycling. My name is Sloan Pagal, and I'm the Zero Waste Program Manager with Zero Waste Sonoma, and I will be moderating this session. Today, we're going to spend some time sharing information on changes to the bottle bill and related legislation and funding at the state level, as well as provide an update on our local CRV recycling pilot program. With us is Susan Collins, president of the Container Recycling Institute. CRI is recognized as the expert source for information on container recycling and container deposit systems and plays a vital role in educating policymakers, government officials, and the public regarding the social and environmental impacts of the production and disposal of one-way beverage containers. CRI also works to debunk myths about container recycling promoted by the beverage, retail, and container manufacturing industries. Also here with us today is Jeremy Hogan, Director of Community Employment at the United Cerebral Palsy of the North Bay, or UCPNB. His organization operates the Petaluma Recycling Center and has partnered with Zero Waste Sonoma on a pilot program to bring up to 10 new recycling and redemption kiosks to Sonoma County. Thank you both for being here to share information on this topic, and thank you to our audience for tuning in today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. Susan is going to kick us off with a legislative update. And if you have questions along the way related to that, please put them in the chat. After Susan's presentation, then we're going to move into slides from Jeremy about our local pilot program. And then we'll do all of the questions at the end. So we will share the slides from both the presentations so that everyone who's registered will get those, and we'll post the recording of this webinar as well as those presentations on our website in the next week or so. So with that, I will pass it over to Susan. Susan, take it away.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm delighted that everyone is here today to hear about this. There's a lot that happened in the legislature this year, more in California than in any year since I've been in the legislature, or since I've been monitoring the legislation in California. Yes, I can't talk and do anything at the same time. So I'm going to try to show my slideshow from the start. Here we go. Please hold during the silence. And now I think it's displaying properly. There we go. All right. So there's a lot to present this morning. I've tried to boil this down to a manageable amount. But I will say that when we did the analysis of the big bill that passed this year, SB 1013, that analysis, I think, was 14 pages long, going through, all of the provisions in the bill and their implications, financial implications, environmental implications, implications for tonnage. Our organization hosted a webinar on this topic that was an hour and a half long. So this is a very much condensed version. So I might be going too quickly on some things, but the slides will be available to you afterwards if there's things that you need to catch up on because I went over them too quickly. So we'll move right into it. I'll start with just the overview and then go into the background and then go through all the different pieces and parts of the legislation that passed. So first of all, there were multiple bills that passed. It wasn't just one bill, but all together, they form the whole program, the whole vision for where the bottle bill is going to go in the future. So the bills, the pieces in the different parts of the different bills actually fit together. So going all the way back to April, there were two problems that cropped up that really desperately needed solving. And I was thrilled to see the legislature really jump into to it and solve those right away when they heard about them, like literally within weeks. They solved those problems. So the first two problems that were solved in April were they fixed a part of the recycled content bill that was a fatal flaw. The entire bill would have just collapsed if they hadn't fixed this problem. The recycled content law is one that requires recycled material to be used to make new beverage containers in the state. It starts at 15% content, and over time, over the years, it ramps up to 50% recycled content. That's the highest level of recycled content of any bill in the world. And it's right here in California, but the whole thing would have fallen apart if they hadn't fixed it. So they fixed it. That was great. Similarly, the handling fee, a new study came out that was required by law, but the study would have cut the handling fees in half at exactly the time that the redemption centers don't need any cuts because we're experiencing inflation, especially labor inflation. And so the legislature quickly realized that and fixed that and stabilized the handling fees. Then SB 38 is something that's been worked on for 2 years. It was finally boiled down to just a bill that addresses some fraud issues and also a study of contamination in glass coming through material recovery facilities. Both of those things very helpful. Not huge provisions, any of these that I've mentioned so far, but all of them very helpful and a step in the right direction. Then, this is important for context. In June, SB 54 passed, which is an EPR for packaging law. So we have the law for beverage containers, but then there's all that other packaging out there. And now in California, as of June, we have a law that addresses the recycling of all the other packaging materials, and those were all in SB 54. That led to what happened in item number 4. SB 1013 was the big bill that passed, and it covers wine and spirits containers. So wine and spirits containers, even though they're beverage containers, they were never in the beverage container law historically for the last 40 years. The wine industry has fought against that for a long time. And with the EPR for packaging law coming up, it was clear that they were going to have to be in one or the other. And they chose to be in the bottle bill. And so they sponsored this bill to add wine and spirits to the bottle bill. And they were enthusiastically supportive of it. And the bill was passing through many, many committees with absolutely no opposition because it finally had the support of the wine and spirits industry. It also, at the end of the session, we were surprised with 55 pages of amendments to that bill at the absolute last minute that added $900 million in cost to the bill. And I'll be going over that $900 million. Then lastly, a companion bill to SB 1013 passed, which was AB 179, the budget bill. So some of the provisions that are very much related to the expansion of the program and the modernization of the program, some of those provisions, or most of them are in SB 1013, but some of them are in this other bill, AB 179, the budget bill. So a little more background here. We have had a long, steady decline of the program, and I know people in Sonoma County are aware of this with all the closures that happened there. Over time, we lost more than 1,200 redemption centers in the state, which is more than half of them. A lot of that was due to a flawed payment formula, but there are a number of things in the law that have needed updating. And of course, once all those centers close and people don't have a place they can go to return their bottles and cans, of course, the redemption rate in the state is going to drop. We've lost about 15 points of the redemption rate. There's also been this long-standing, inaccurate, underestimated reporting of the fund balance by CalRecycle. This year, earlier in the year, in January, February timeframe, CalRecycle reported their fund balance, and it was actually $175 million less than what they had. They turned in one set of numbers to the legislature and turned in the correct set of numbers to the state controller's office, and we at CRI obtained the correct numbers from the state controller's office, and happened to be talking to a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle who was interested in reporting on that. So when that came to light, that this $175 million had been improperly reported, there was an oversight hearing in April of 2022. I think that actually the oversight hearing was in March of 2022. Within days of this issue being reported and the oversight hearing, Cal Recycle also put together a budget change proposal where they proposed spending a whole bunch of this money, this newly found money, to improve the program. And that really started the conversation going about what we could do for modernization, how we could improve the program, what new things could be put in place. So this is all the background that sort of led to the push in that direction. These bills were introduced and debated over a 2-year session, but everything really came together in literally the last 3 days of session. The final week of change, it added changes to bills, added to this huge spending that literally adds up to $1.3 billion. And the fund doesn't have that much money. The fund has like 600 or 700 million. So it's twice as much money as the fund has. And that's the nature of everything coming up at the very last minute and nobody getting out their calculator and saying, does this add up? So that's all going to need to be addressed also. So here we go, digging into what happened. So I mentioned the expansion to wine and spirits. The key point that's a huge benefit for all of us is that wine and spirits are now going to be accepted into the bottle bill, and that will result in a lot more recycling of these containers. There's an interesting twist that they added new containers. Right now, we don't have any of these in the bottle bill, but just for wine and spirits, they added bag and box, like, boxed wine, pouches, aseptics. Yes, you can get wine in something that looks like a juice box, or similar containers. So those things are all now going to be in the program as of January 1st, 2024. And those new containers are going to have a 25% deposit and refund, as opposed to 5 or 10 cents like all the rest of the containers. Also, since there's no lower size limit in California, this is automatically also going to include nips. And when I say nips, I mean those little tiny spirits bottles, like, Absolute vodka or that kind of thing. They're 50 or 100 milliliters, and they get frequently littered. I know in my neighborhood, there's a liquor store that I walk past when I'm walking my dog, and there's always these little nips bottles around. It's very popular to litter them. So California will only be the 3rd state in the nation to include these nips bottles in their bottle bill, which from a litter perspective is really important. And our website has a 5-page bill summary, the short one, and then also the 14-page analysis. So there's a lot more information available for everybody on our website. Okay, so here are the benefits. This is why we're so excited about wine and spirits expansion. There will be higher recycling rates for these containers. It means that 500 million more containers will be recycled. I mean, this is a product of us living in a state with a lot of population. And we literally drink, I think it's 25 or 50% more wine than the rest of the country. It's, sort of our state mascot. So 300,000 new tons will be recycled instead of going to landfill. Completely exciting. And that means it'll produce a lot more clean materials for manufacturing. We have 5 glass bottle making manufacturers in California. They will be able to use more recycled content in making those bottles. We also have 5 fiberglass facilities in California, and they'll get a lot more material too. And the beverage container litter for those beverage categories will probably be cut in half. Like, these statistics are what we see in other places. And so we'll see a lot fewer of those little nips bottles. And the greenhouse gas emissions reduction will be equivalent to taking 23,000 cars off the road. So we're very excited about all of these things. Okay, now we move on to other parts of the bill. We have something in California called a convenience zone. If there is a grocery store that starts the center of a convenience zone, and there's supposed to be a redemption center within a half mile of that grocery store. That's the law. It doesn't exist everywhere. There are exemptions allowed, but we have more than 1,000 of what's called unserved zones in California, where there's supposed to be a redemption center there and there isn't. Again, that's due to these the closures that we've experienced in the last several years. So they put together sort of a new program to address that. And it's what we're trying in California has never been done exactly like this anywhere else in the world. This is a new concept. So first of all, the radius is increasing from 1/2 mile to 1 mile. So they're giving the stores a little more flexibility. As long as there's, a redemption center within a mile, that counts, and the zone would be considered served. In the rural areas, it goes all the way up to 5 miles. So these zones are quite a bit larger than what we have in the existing program. And there's no more option B. Right now, the stores are allowed to just buy their way out of the program if they want to. A grocery store can say, we're not going to accept containers in store. We don't have a nearby redemption center. We are going to pay the option B fee of $100 a day. There aren't that many stores that do that. I think it's only 100 in the state, but they won't be able to buy their way out of the program anymore with option B. That's going away. So this is a little visualization. This is actually to scale of what the zone sizes look like. Because if you remember geometry, pi r squared, when you go from 1/2 mile to 1 mile, you're not doubling the area, you're actually multiplying by 4. So the bigger circle on the left, the bigger light blue circle, is actually 4 times the area of the smaller circle. And the relative size of the new convenience zone area in the rural areas is really huge. That new size is 78 square miles. It's enormous. So it really did make a change, not for the better, on convenience. And this is something that if we had had a chance to lobby against it, we would have lobbied and said, this is not good for consumer convenience. But the provision was introduced in the last 3 days of session, and there was no time to say anything about what was in the bill. It was introduced, and then within a few hours, it was passed. So more on these dealer cooperatives. What we see all around the world is not a dealer cooperative. And when I say dealer, that's a retailer. Usually it's all of the brand owners getting together to form a nonprofit that runs the whole deposit system. California's experiment is to let the dealers form a cooperative. So I don't know if these are going to be like county by county or even city by city, or if the dealers are going to form one huge cooperative to operate redemption centers all around the state. I have no idea how this is going to play out in real time. But if a convenience zone has no recycling center, all of the dealers in that area can form a cooperative, and they can cite their own redemption center. And then they would all have to pay into that to help support the operation, the financial operation of that center. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. And that's going to kick in 2 years and a month, January 1st of 2025. More on the dealer cooperatives. We've got a definition here. I won't go through that. But I will say that CalRecycle is going to adopt emergency regulations by January 1st of 2024, and they may provide one or more sample dealer cooperative redemption plans, meaning, like a plan of operation. I'm calling out that point on this slide because there's going to be some sort of a regulatory process where CalRecycle is going to have some sort of public meetings. And that's an opportunity for all of us to stay engaged on this issue and say, this is what we think the cooperatives should look like. This is what kind of service we consider convenient for consumers, so that it doesn't get defined in a way that offered no new convenience for consumers. Okay, so the retailer and dealer exemptions are also changing. Right now, up to 35% of the zones can be exempt. The max new number of exemptions is down to 15%. So hopefully, again, this is the goal. What the language looks like is that it's leading to more convenience for consumers. Also, they're working on redrawing the convenience zone maps. And we've heard just in the last couple of days that CalRecycle says that they're going to get those drawn, I think by the middle of January. So we'll know what the new maps look like with those new zone sizes. That'll give us an idea, give everybody an idea of where these new redemption centers need to go. Also, the smaller retailers are now completely exempt from the program. The smaller retailers used to have to provide take-back services in store if they were in an unserved zone. And now if their revenue is less than $1.5 million, or if their site is less than 5,000 square feet, they are exempt. So this is really just requirements on the larger retailers, not the smaller ones. Now we're getting into the grants and the funding that's available. And again, I don't know how this is going to play out when they've committed twice as much money to be spent as they actually have. You know, how are they going to do that? Are all of these grant programs going to be funded? Or some of them going to be funded at half the level? I don't know. And there's about 7 different grant programs, I think, between the 2 bills. So the grant programs, some of them are small, some of them are large. They range from $1 million grant program to, on this page, there's a $60 million a year grant program. The first several of them have to do with glass. So recycled glass processing incentive program, I believe that's the one that is money available to glass processors. The thinking there is that if we're going to have 300,000 tons of new glass, then we need more equipment and more facilities to handle that material. That makes sense. The increased recycling of empty glass beverage containers grant program is to pay for the collection and transportation of glass, like especially bar and restaurant programs. That's what that one sounds like they're thinking about. And then the transportation grant program is only for glass that gets shipped by rail. So that would be probably from facility to facility, like from a MRF to a glass beneficiation facility. Then there are glass quality incentive payments for the glass that goes through material recovery facilities to get cleaned up to a level where it can go to market. There are market development payments to glass beverage container manufacturers. So the container manufacturers who are buying recycled glass from the beneficiators can get up to $60 million a year for that. And then Community Conservation Corps grants to provide workforce to handle all this new glass. There are also a lot of miscellaneous changes in SB 1013, but the one that we're highlighting here is the penalty amounts are increasing from $1,000 to $5,000, and those can be per day. So if a grocery retailer doesn't participate in one of these cooperatives, if they're one of those unserved zones, this is signaling that CalRecycle is going to have a lot of teeth and coming down on them and saying, you know, here are the penalties. You really need to adhere to the law and establish a redemption center, or you're going to pay a lot in fines. Okay, here's another topic. This is a weird thing that is an unintended consequence of the bill. The fact that wine and liquor bottles are in the law now, a lot of those are going to go to the redemption centers, and the handling fees and the processing payments are going to pay the redemption centers for that material. But in California, material recovery facilities and curbside programs are also eligible for payments. So even though the curbside programs will be handling fewer wine and spirits bottles, of course, because they're now going to be going to redemption centers, so they'll have fewer wine and spirits bottles to handle. Now the remaining wine and spirits bottles will be eligible for payments. And so even though they'll be handling less material, they'll suddenly be paid $46 million a year for doing less recycling than they're doing currently. And so we commented on this, that is not a good use of public funds to pay $46 million and get absolutely no recycling tonnage out of it that wasn't already happening. But there we are. Now I'm down to the last couple of slides here on the funding that's available. We summarized what was in that companion bill, AB 179. We really like some of the expenditures in this. There's a whole bucket of things that are in that 4th line item, the local assistance, beverage container recycling and litter reduction, that $233 million. I'll cover that on the next slide. One thing on this slide, though, that 3 different governors, I think, have sworn that they wouldn't do this again, that they wouldn't borrow money from the Beverage Container Fund. And then here we are. There's a loan to the California Circular Economy Fund of $11 million. It's this fund, this Beverage Container Fund keeps getting used as like the emergency piggy bank. So on the next slide, this is the breakdown of that 233 million that was on the previous slide. So in this bucket of money, there's the first 3 line items are startup costs for recycling programs, recycling centers, mobile recycling, RVMs, which are reverse vending machines for grocery stores to take back containers, bag drop programs, startup loans for processors and recyclers. And one of my favorite pieces of this, I lobbied for this for a long time, $25 million for refillables. We've never had that anywhere in the world, a grant program to help kickstart refillables for beverage containers. And it's something I've advocated for the last 13 years. So I'm super excited about that. Anyway, so there's a bunch of good money in here that could be used to start up these new redemption centers. So that's exactly what we need to be doing. There's some other things on here, the ones toward the bottom. We've called them not an effective use of fund because we've got a history of many years of having these kind of quality incentive payments, and they don't result in anything happening that's different than what's already happening. The material is moving through the same process, and suddenly they apply a quality payment to it, and no new recycling happens as a result of it. So that's not an effective use of funds. So here's the summary. These first 2, 900 million in SB 1013, AB 179 is 400 million. The 2 bills together total 1.3 billion in spending, but the fund only has 635 million. So this overspending is going to have to be addressed. There's also some weird sequencing things where money is available 2 years before the requirement to have programs in place. So I don't see how people are going to apply for money and get it maybe a year ahead of time, but then have to sit on the equipment, have to buy a bunch of equipment that they can't use for a year. So weird stuff like that, it seems like needs to be addressed as well. And so that's the end of this presentation. I know it was just chock full of a bunch of really dense requirements and grant programs and everything. But there's a lot more information on our website that breaks it down more slowly than what I just did. We also have a free weekly headlines newsletter. You can sign up for that on our homepage on our website. So don't hesitate to contact us if you have more questions about this. And I'll end with a pretty picture, the same one that's sort of behind me. This is a perfect illustration of what one person's beverage container consumption looks like in a year. This is the average per capita consumption is 822 bottles and cans, ranging from paper cartons to aluminum to plastic and covering everything from milk to wine to soda to water to beer. So it's not trivial, and it's really important that we get all this stuff recycled for greenhouse gas reasons and get it all collected to, keep this litter off of our roads and out of our rivers and oceans. So thank you all for your attention. I'll turn it back over probably to Sloan, right?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. That was a really great presentation. You fit a ton of information into just 30 minutes. So thank you for that. I am not seeing any questions in the chat or Q&A. So if people are still stewing on those, just pop them in as they come up, and we'll have a chance to answer those at the end. Okay, great. Well, and I know I have a couple questions too. So, all right, Jeremy, are you ready to share your screen and give folks an update on the Sonoma County pilot?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Sloan. And thank you, Susan, for that informative and super comprehensive presentation. I'm going to also try to do 2 things at once and speak and try to share my screen. We'll see how successful I am with that. But here we are. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, well, my name is Jeremy Hogan. I'm the Director of Community Employment for UCP-NB, United Cerebral Palsy of the North Bay. UCP's mission is to enhance the quality of life of people with cerebral palsy and other disabilities, their families, and their communities. We envision a future where people with disabilities live with dignity and participate in meaningful and experience success. So we are partnered with Zero Waste Sonoma. And Zero Waste Sonoma is the public name, for those of you who don't know, for the Sonoma County Waste Management Agency. They were established in 1992 as the Joint Powers Authority for the unincorporated area in 9 cities and towns in Sonoma County. So we have worked together with them. Our main mission, as I mentioned, is to support people with disabilities, and we do job trainings. And one of our sites is the Petaluma Recycling Center. And we are working with Zero Waste Sonoma for this pilot project, which we will be opening up to 10 pilot locations throughout Sonoma County. So, as was mentioned by Susan, there used to be many more redemption centers throughout the state of California. Just 10 years ago, there were over 25 CRV redemption centers in Sonoma County. Due to a bunch of different factors, it's becoming increasingly expensive for operators to continue to stay open, especially in the last 5 years. And before the pilot project, we were down to just 4 recycling centers. However, due to a recent closure in Windsor, we now have 3. So our goal is to improve the access for redemption sites throughout the community. Currently, we have 2 pilot programs that have opened. These are the 2 sites here on this slide. One is located in Sebastopol at the community church. We are open at that location Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. We also recently opened a site in Healdsburg. That site is open on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. We also have our Petaluma Recycling Center, which is open from Tuesdays to Saturdays. On the side here are some of the rates for standard CRV and listings of other types of plastics that we do accept. This little link down here is something when you get the slides you can check out, and that just has maps and more information on all of the different sites and locations. So, how it works. All right, so this is a picture of one of our sites in Sebastopol. So what the public will do is, you separate your eligible CRV by material type. You'll take your cans and bottles to one of our sites, locations that are hopefully conveniently located within the community. Once you get there, you'll work with our staff to set up an account with our organization, and we'll weigh the material on site. We have scales operated by solar panels, and customers will receive a payment on site. And that after that point, on a daily basis, we'll bring back those materials back to our Petaluma Recycling Center for processing. So that's kind of how it works at the different sites. So as I mentioned, we have 2. The good news is it was just this week, the City Council for Windsor approved 5-0 approval to use part of their town-owned property at 25 Bluebird Drive for a new site, a new redemption site. So we're working with the town of Windsor, and hopefully we will have that location up in the beginning of 2023. And some of the future sites that have also been identified are the city of Sonoma, Santa Rosa, Rohnert Park, Cloverdale, as well as Petaluma. So the sites, as I mentioned right now, as you can see in this picture, we have staff that are at the sites. Also, some of the individuals we support are also receiving job training on those sites. However, the goal is to eventually evolve this system into a bag drop system. So the goal for that is that customers would be able to have a bag that has a barcode on those bags that are set up to their specific account. They would then bring their bags full of recyclable materials to our sites and be able to drop them off. Eventually, we'd like to see this get to a situation where customers will be able to drop off those bags at any time of the day. But we'll be doing a lot of education up front on how that system will be implemented and the details of what that would look like. The benefit of the bag drop system is that the items will not need to be separated. So that's something that will be hopefully a little bit more convenient for customers. And the way that they'll get paid is through an online payment system, such as PayPal. So the customers would set up an account with us, and once they would bring their material within a certain amount of time, that would be their account would be given the money. Some other future possibilities are reverse vending machines in the future. And if you're not familiar with that, I would encourage you to look into some of the reverse vending machine technology that's out there. It's pretty interesting, and that's hopefully some additional technology that we'd be able to provide to the community in the future. So that pretty much concludes our presentation. As I mentioned, we are partnered with Zero Waste Sonoma, and yeah, that is it.
And
so
I just want to make one quick clarifying comment about where folks can go in Sonoma County to redeem their cans and bottles. So we mentioned the Petaluma Recycling Center is sort of the hub for your recycling company, and where all the material goes for the pilot project. But I also just want to note that there are 2 locations in Santa Rosa that offer redemption as well. And one is the 76 gas station off Sebastopol Road, and one is the Republic Services off South Santa Rosa Ave. So just a note that we do have those 2. Okay, so I have a couple questions. Ugo asked if we're going to record the webinar and share the presentations. Yes, we're going to share that on our website. Check back in about a week or so, and just search CRV in the top search bar, and you should be able to find that. Next question. Yeah, Jeremy, do you want to maybe exit your screen and we can kind of go back, and we may have some questions for the group. So I think Annette has a question about the payment. Would you be able to get the money out of PayPal? How would that payment work once it transitions to the automated system?
Yeah, so that would be something you would have an account where PayPal, you would be able to receive that money, obviously through PayPal. There's different ways that you could set it up. This system is based on an OBRC kind of system that we've really taken the inspiration from. And they have a system where if you don't want the money and you want to donate it to an organization, you could easily do that through PayPal. But obviously, the money would be accessible through you, through your account, through a PayPal sort of account. Right now, individuals who are bringing their materials to these redemption sites, you're getting issued a check once you're there. So that will evolve, as I mentioned, with time, and we're going to be doing a lot of the education on that as we evolve that and as we go through. So we'll be working out some of those kinks and some of those little roadblocks as they come up.
And just in case folks aren't familiar with OBRC, that is the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative, I believe. Is that yeah, Susan?
Yes.
So they have kind of run their bag drop program for at least a few years at this point. It's been really received well, and I think they're a good model for us to look at. So fingers crossed. I think it's more of a timing issue for this program, and just lining up all of the pieces that need to come together to sort of allow that to happen. But yeah, I think within 6 to 8 months, we could probably be in a good place with negotiations. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah. As far as the bag drop system.
Yeah,
we're actually going to be rolling that out as soon as possible. We're working on that now to just to implement somewhat of a manual bag drop system. And like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time, as much time as needed, to do the education on this. So yeah, we're hoping by early next year, we'll have the bag drop system, at least the first phase of it, started. When it gets to the full bag drop system, yeah, that kind of depends on a lot of different factors and timing to when that can be fully run bag drop system.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to break it off with a question for Susan that I had. So you were showing the maps of the rural and the urban zones and kind of how much bigger they're going to get with this new bill or new law. And I know that you said that CRI didn't have a chance to really make a comment or make any changes, and it just kind of leads to seemingly a lot of unanswered questions. So what are the next steps with the state? Like, how does anyone engage to try to like help shape? I mean, is CRI and other lobbying groups going to have a seat at the table to try to help answer those questions?
We wish we knew at this point. I'm getting my information either from what they've said at the public meetings, which is not very much so far, or from other individuals I know who have spoken with the leadership at CalRecycle. Also, I'll tell you what I do know. Earlier this year, CalRecycle put together their own budget change proposal. That's where the agency says to the legislature, we would like additional funding to do X. And the thing that they wanted funding for was staff positions in their regulatory development department, like creating an entirely new department. And because right now they just sort of do it on an ad hoc basis and probably have to borrow employees from different departments every time a new bill comes out. So that was already put in place. They already received funding, and I can't remember how many employees it was, whether it's 5, 10, something in that range, I think. I have heard other people who have talked to the leadership of CalRecycle say that they are staffing up that department so that those people will be ready and available to work on these regulations. I've also heard that they're going to do some sort of regulatory process that has public comment. What that usually looks like at CalRecycle is that they do host at least one meeting, where they go through and say, these are the regulations we've developed, and they solicit feedback at that time, and people can send in comments in writing. And there's usually more than one like 30-day process comment period. But we haven't heard when those things are going to be scheduled, or even if CalRecycle is developing a master calendar for how that's going to happen. So it's sort of all too soon to know. I think one of the good steps for all of us, anybody who wants to be engaged on this, is to attend their monthly meetings and ask these specific questions. When are we going to know? When are we going to have an opportunity to discuss these things with CalRecycle and give our input into this process? It's also good to send in questions like that to perhaps the public information officer, to maybe ask for a presentation about it at the next CalRecycle monthly meeting, because we're all interested. We all want to know, how do we engage in this process? Mm-hmm. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yeah, you kind of answered. I was going to follow up with how can folks get engaged, and you already answered that like a pro. Okay, in the chat, we have a couple questions more about the operational, how we run the program. So Jeremy, will the plastic bottles need to have the cap on as well as the labels for redemption?
That's a great question. Yes, the labels do need to be to remain on the bottles in order to be accepted. That is a CalRecycle regulation. However, regarding the caps, and maybe Susan, I don't know if you'll know this better than me. I've been told different things. Some of the caps, some of the bottles say to keep the caps on. We've accepted them without caps. So either way, regarding the caps is fine for us. But the label does need to remain on the bottle. But Susan, have you heard anything regarding caps either one way or the other?
I would say on a national level, for many years, the Association of Plastics Recyclers, those are the folks who get the bottles after they leave the redemption center and get baled up and go for washing and repelletizing, making into pellets or flake. So the plastics reclaimers, their organization for a long time was saying that they didn't want the caps, but a few years ago, they had a critical mass of their facilities who were able to separate the caps, able to find recycling markets for the caps, and they completely changed across the country, and they said, leave the caps on. So that's their latest guidance, and I follow, their guidance.
Yeah. We do accept both, but most of the bottles, as you'll notice, say to keep the cap on there in order to be recycled.
I'm going to just follow that up with another question that I know people have. What about cans? Can they be crushed, or do they need to remain intact?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think I will have a good enough answer for you. I think either way we will take crushed or uncrushed cans. I don't think that there's a reason for us not to take crushed cans at this point. That might be a misinformation.
Okay, yeah, because I had heard that maybe there was some issues with rod if they came in crushed, but happy to know that the Petaluma Recycling Center and the pilot locations will have either. Great.
Technically, I think in California law, there's literally a measure of how crushed is crushed. So if it's just somebody crumpling it in their hand, that's one thing. But if it's gone through some sort of a machine to crush it, that's an indication, just what you guys both hinted at, that it's been through a facility and somebody is trying to redeem it a second time. So there is something in law. This rarely comes up because mainly it's just individuals, collecting their own bottles and cans, and they squish them, but they're not completely flattened.
And trying to save some space, probably. I think a lot of folks were really stockpiling their CRV over the last few years. And so I think that the crushed cans were really common, at least for a little while, emerging out of that.
Yeah, and I think it goes to, sorry, Susan, it goes to the point of, having similar to having like a label removed from a plastic bottle where, like you mentioned, if it's gone through recycled already or been through it already, and that's something we want to stay away from, obviously.
There is one other case where you would want them not to be crushed if and when RVMs become more common in California. Those are the reverse vending machines. You really want to have an uncrushed can at that point so that it's still round, because the RVM itself rotates the can so that it can read the barcode. So all of the containers that go through those facilities are not through those machines are not crushed so that they work well in the machines. And then the machine crushes them.
Susan, you touched right on a comment from Travis, who actually mentioned that in the Q&A. So that's a very good point.
Okay, we have another question about limits. So is there a weight limit or a number of containers that folks can bring in per day to the recycling redemption kiosks?
Yes, there are. We do have limits for our for the pilot project. For aluminum and plastic, that's 25 pounds per day. Limit for those, and for glass it's 250 pounds limit per day. We have reduced the glass limits in our Sebastopol location to 50 pounds for glass per day, and that was due to some neighborhood noise concerns. But those limits are put on for the pilot project just because we've noticed we are limited in the amount of material that we can accept per day. So when somebody brings too much or large amounts, it restricts more people in the public from actually utilizing that. So we use those limits just to try to make it equitable for the public.
Thank you. And we have a question from Lars asking whether there's a possibility of expanding the pilot to neighboring counties. And unfortunately, we can't do that within our existing application. It is limited. So the first round of the application included 6 of the 10 jurisdictions. It was Cloverdale, Healdsburg, Sevastopol, Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Sonoma. And the reason why we didn't include every single jurisdiction is because at that time, the convenience zones that Susan was mentioning in her presentation, they were already served in the other 4 locations. But the length of time that it has taken for us to get to this point at the pilot, we now have some unserved convenience zones. And that's why we are trying to work with Windsor, Roanoke Park, and possibly eventually the county and Cotati to get added to the program. But really with the Windsor closure recently, the town is interested in bringing it, and we already have that location identified, so we are hoping to move quickly there. I have been in touch with Lake County, and I know that they want to bring some solutions to Lake County. So I know it's rough. It's rough in Northern California, and that's why we're trying to participate in this program. Hopefully our neighboring counties can get into the second phase of the pilot and participate that way.
And Sloan, there are, just to follow up on your response, there are other types of pilot projects throughout the state that are different than the pilot project that UCP, NB, and Zero Waste Sonoma are participating in. But there are other types of pilot projects throughout the state that are focusing on expansion of CRV approaches, correct?
Yeah, I think in the Bay, San Mateo County is another pilot, and I think they have a similar system that we're currently using. I think one of the more innovative options is down in Irvine in Southern California, where they actually are doing curbside collection of just CRV in different neighborhoods in Irvine. But so far, I'm not aware of any like reverse vending machine style. And I know San Francisco is also doing a sort of a bag drop program as well, because they are also trying to model on the Oregon model as well.
Yeah. Not enough though. I'll say that, right?
Not enough, and not quickly enough, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Let's see. Oh, I have another question for Susan though. I'm also really excited about the potential of refill coming on as part of the funding. And I don't know how many folks in this audience have heard of Conscious Container, but that's the only one that I'm aware of that's working in that space, and they actually are working closely, I want to say with Bear Republic, but at least they have a site up in Cloverdale. So Karen McNamara, who is the founder of Conscious Container, is really actively trying to bring solutions for refillable beverage containers to Sonoma County and beyond. I'm wondering, Susan, if you know of any others, or how that funding might work.
I'm sort of surprised that I haven't been approached by more companies that are interested in doing refill. It's almost like we're going out and reaching out to them to make sure that they know that this funding is going to come available, because it was part of the surprise. I was reading the bill and I went, holy cow, there it is, 25 million for refillables. And that was in AB 179, which the bill language came out at like 6 p.m. on Sunday night, and it was voted on 9 a.m. Monday morning. So, truly nobody knew this was coming.
Came out of thin air.
There are a couple of places that are doing refillables. One of them is a milk producer, Strauss, and they ship their refillable milk bottles all over the state. So I don't know if they'd be interested in having another site for filling in Southern California, if that would be beneficial to them. And I don't know if they would be eligible because it's milk and not one of the container types that's in the beverage container program. There is also another, I'm blanking on their name. There's a wine producer in Southern California that has a proprietary process for refilling wine bottles on site. They're in La Jolla. And it seems like they would be a good company that could go after some of this funding in order to expand their program and have more sites where they could do that. So I've also just heard rumors that there's a couple of other much bigger brands that are interested in citing a refilling spot. So what it takes is a huge washing facility and the production of all of the bottles that are refillable quality. Usually, like with the program OBRC has in Oregon, they created a special mold to create those refillable bottles because the bottles are a little more sturdy because you want them to withstand being washed and reused 25 times. And they look special so that you know that this is the refillable bottle. They're easy to identify and when they're returned and get them sent to the right place. So creating a new mold is expensive, and setting up a washing facility is also expensive. And then making enough bottles so that you have what they call the float. So you always have some in inventory. There's a cost to that too. So those are important startup costs that would need to be covered for anybody who wanted to do a refillables program.
Well, thank you for that. And I mean, with all of the wine here in Sonoma County, it seems like it would be such a great place if wineries can kind of get together like they did in Oregon and agree on a mold for a standardized wine bottle that could be put into a program, something like that. But thank you for explaining that, because I think there's a lot to be said about refillables and reuse. And, I think I like to remind folks, we have so much information coming in about recycling, but really when you look at the highest and best use, it is reusing. So I'm really happy to, even though that was a surprise, I think, there's good and bad surprises. That was a good surprise.
Very good surprise.
I have a question for you, Susan, if we have time.
Sure.
We talked a lot today about, all these recycling centers shutting down just because of not being able to really do business effectively or sustainably. Do you see these changes in legislation? I mean, I really appreciate that the handling fees were not reduced, but do you see the recent legislation in addressing the sustainability of this field or helping in any way? Or do you think this is still an issue that's going to trouble our field?
If the letter of the law is followed, and if there's sufficient enforcement and monitoring and enforcement to force all of the dealers to form dealer cooperatives so that their zones are served, and if the 15% exemption limit is really adhered to, then we should have a lot more. I mean, like I said, there's more than 1,000 zones right now that are unserved.
Yeah.
If those are all served by having new redemption centers there, that can really right this ship. And it should be, the road is paved for them by having $73 million a year for 3 years to do the startup, to fund the startup costs to physically build the sites.
Yeah.
So if everything goes to plan and it's all carefully monitored and carefully implemented, then yes, it should be way better. And I think the only way it's going to be carefully monitored and carefully implemented is if all of us are engaged to make sure that happens.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
That was probably our best place to end this webinar. And I just want to thank you both once again for being here. Remind our audience that we will be sharing this online on our website, zerowastesonoma.gov, so you can check back in about a week. And thanks again, Susan and Jeremy.
Thanks, Sloan. Thanks,
Thank you,
Susan.
Sloan. Thank you so much for hosting us and for doing this. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.